Hey folks, one more NixOS video, number 56. So I'm going to compare NixOS against Fedora Silverblue, and sort of the AKA of this video is why NixOS both is and is not an immutable Linux distribution. Right off the rip here, I just want to let you know that a link to the left-hand thing, this script here that I have, talkie script, will be in the description of the video. This is kind of a wall of text sort of thing. Just a lot of explaining. I'm gonna try to do a demo at the end of, doing equivalent operations in both Silverblue and in Nix. But most of this is just going to be me talking. So whatever. You could probably just read it and get the idea. But it is a bit wall of texty. So in any case, if you're a frequent watcher of tech YouTube channels like I don't know, like DJ Ware and there's Linux Cast and Chris Titus Tech and other channels like that, and even things like Linus Tech Tips and stuff. It's pretty hard to avoid videos about quote unquote immutable Linux distributions, and some of these are like Fedora Silverblue, Vanilla OS, Talos Linux. There's maybe 20 of them now or something, and NixOS often gets lumped in to the immutable Linux distribution bucket, along with Geeks, which is Nix inspired. And the thing, and I see people online, and including some of the people I mentioned before, sort of assuming that NixOS works like these other immutable Linux distributions, but it really doesn't. And so it is indeed an immutable distribution, but the way that it uses immutability is just different than these other things. And I'm just going to demonstrate how that is. So, first of all, NixOS doesn't rely on application containerization for package management, like Flatpaks and stuff. Like in Fedora, sorry, I have Silverblue running over here. So in Silverblue, if you go and search for an application, what's going to wind up happening is a Flatpak will be installed. And that is the way you install software on Fedora Blue. NixOS supports Flatpaks and app images, but it doesn't require them. And most people who use NixOS don't really bother with them so much. And when it installs an application, it's almost never inside a container in NixOS, and it's often only in strange circumstances does it require like even a cheroot or something like that. So it's different in that way. That's neither good nor bad to me, but we'll talk a little bit about how that might be both good and bad in a bit. But all these other, Fedora Silverblue, Vanilla OS, there's this concept of sort of this immutable base image that's created by the upstream. So in the case of Silverblue, some people at Red Hat create an image that is read-only, and it has a bunch of software in it. And you can't change the software without restarting. At least you can't change the software without updating to what they've given you upstream. And when you do that, you have to reboot. So there are these. So there's this rpm-ostree thing that is sort of like this A/B boot system. And in order to, so like if I ls/bin here, we can tell that there is a ton of software in this base image. User bin. I mean, there is a lot of software in here. And I'm not a Silverblue expert, so some of this may be installed in. Not all of this not all of this is necessarily part of this base image, but I suspect most of it is. So, you're getting the software as a big lump from upstream, and it's what you get. And when you want to update one of these packages, you're going to have to get it from the upstream or install a Flatpak version of the same software. I think that's how that works. Again, I'm not a Silverblue expert. I might be, whiffing on some of that explanation, but for the most part, I think most of this stuff comes from in the base image, and the base image is handed down from on high to you as a Silverblue user, and the purported benefit of this is that it's immutable, so you can't change it, so that it's more secure, which is probably true. But it is a big ball of software that you're getting from them. NixOS doesn't work like this. The system packages, meaning the stuff in Silverblue that ships with the base image, and your normal user packages are managed exactly the same way. They go into this thing called a store, and the reason that both we can get away with this in NixOS, we don't have to use Flatpaks, and we don't have this huge immutable base image, is because NixOS is not an FHS, file system hierarchy standard compliant Linux distribution. And this is the only reason we can get away with this. It means when you install software into Nix, it doesn't sort of, the software that you install doesn't sort of overlay itself on top of the root file system and etc bin user, etc., like almost every other Linux distribution does. Instead, it installs each package into a separate directory inside of what is the store. So let's see, less Nix store, less all your software goes in here. So for Flatpak people, this is sort of like var lib Flatpak or whatever, that's where all the Flatpaks get stored, sort of like that. But these things, and I'm also not a Flatpak expert, so there's probably some in case of emergency break glass thing where Flatpaks can depend on each other. But for the most part, the way I understand it is that a Flatpak is a containerized application that ships all its own dependencies inside the Flatpak. So this is unlike NixOS, where these things that are in this directory can have dependencies on each other, and often do. So it's less like a Mac OS application image or a Flatpak than it is a normal sort of Linux distro, where indeed things do have dependencies on each other and their shared libraries and whatever. So this choice of being non-file system hierarchy standard compliant, meaning that things don't get put in etc and bin and all these global places, really have some non-trivial downsides. And that includes that if you get a binary only package, like if you only have like a some like I use software called Mixbus, which is based on Ardor, but it comes from a company named Harrison. They make music consoles, and it doesn't ship as a Flatpak, and it doesn't ship as an app image. It ships as its own little thing that has like a bash script that sort of decompresses it, and then it expects things to be put in certain file system locations. This doesn't work at all on NixOS. So in order for me to use it, I have to fix it. All right. So I have to go and correct the assumptions that they made about file system hierarchy stuff. And this happens all the time. I mean, NixOS is the packages in Nix are basically a bunch of, there's a lot of them, and people have done a really, really good job of having, wide array of packages to be installed. But packaging something for NixOS is often an effort of just squashing, tens of places where these assumptions are made. And more importantly, I mean, that's not really a big deal because NixOS has so many packages. Usually you don't have to think about it that much, but in those cases where you do, it's a problem. So, but more importantly, This means that the people who sort of, you know, when you sort of lump NixOS into this immutable distribution bucket, I think people think it's just like another Linux distro. It's not at all. It is, and if they sort of say, okay, well, I'm gonna try out, vanilla OS, and then I'll try out NixOS, they're just totally separate. They're totally different things. They're going to be totally disappointed with NixOS because maybe they could be. It depends. It depends. Like if they wanted to run Mixbus, they're going to be really disappointed in NixOS, and probably work fine on Silverblue or whatever. Maybe. I'm not even sure. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't work on Silverblue either, but maybe not. Yeah, actually, maybe probably not. It probably doesn't. But in any case, using NixOS just really does require some understanding how software is built, and sort of a willingness to sort of say, yep, that's fucked up. I'm gonna deal with that in some way. I'm gonna cope. So for example, I have a project that I'm working on for a customer. And it is a Python project. And, there's a system inside of Python, well, there's a package named tox, which is it lets you declaratively sort of say, I'd like to test my project this way. So tox ini, and it looks something like this. This is very standard stuff for Python people. In order to test the package, we have to install some requirements and then run PyTest and whatever. It's not a big deal. This doesn't work under NixOS. If I usually under any other Linux, I'd be able to just install tox and then run tox against this file. But because one of the upstream packages is a wheel, meaning that it contains binary. Well, in this case, it contains a .so file. That's a binary, and the binary expects libc to be installed in a place that is file system hierarchy standard compliant. So if I run tox, it doesn't work. It won't install. So I have to just know that. I have to know that. So in order to get around it, I had to write a Nix shell script that sort of emulates a file system hierarchy standard inside of it. This is not common. I mean, I've only had to do this, one or two times under NixOS, but it is, if you don't know how to do this, you're going to have a miserable time with NixOS. It's not going to be great. And you're going to walk away from it really disappointed. So those are the downsides. What are the upsides? Well, versus something like Silverblue. Under Silverblue, it uses this sort of A/B boot system, and that huge image comes down with all that software in it, and the new version is available. But in order to use the new version, you're going to have to reboot. So if I go back to Silverblue for a second here, you can see that. I have this at 200%. It is not. I hope it's legible. Anyway, if I run rpm-ostree status, these two deployments are going to be there at all times, and basically we switch from one to the other. So this one is currently active. I just installed this in a virtual machine, and one of the first things it did is it updated the image. It didn't even tell me. It just did it. And this is the older image that got installed when I installed it from the ISO. And so it downloaded that image, but in order for me to use any software from that image, I had to reboot. And as soon as I rebooted, then it was there. And so all this software that comes down, in that big thing, I suppose there's just going to be a release every, 2 weeks or whatever of this stuff. When you need an update, you're going to have to reboot. And that, I don't like that. I'm not a fan. But in Nix, when you want to update your system, and I'll show this in a second, I'll have a demo of it. When you want to update your system, You don't have to reboot. The only time you have to reboot is if there's a kernel update. So, and even then, you don't have to reboot if unless you want the features of the kernel. So, another upside is that rather than using containerization like this Flatpak stuff in order to, you know, install things into a sort of a fake root that it thinks it can control. When you have a Flatpak, and again, please Flatpak people don't crucify me here. I'm sure there's ways around this, but for the most part, I think you're gonna wind up with a root file system that is not the root file system of the actual machine. It's going to have differences, and you're gonna have different files in different Flatpaks representing the theming contents and other stuff, and it's just going to be pretty tricky and fiddly to get things consistent under this regime of many Flatpaks. Under NixOS, this is not the case. It's not in a container, so the applications see your actual root file system. So everything is, if you have a GTK theme set up, well, that's your GTK theme. There's no synchronization of GTK themes across many Flatpaks or anything like that I've seen that just weirds me out in these things. Another upside is that multiple versions of the same application and its that application's dependencies in NixOS can exist on the system at the same time. I'm sure there's possible Flatpak too, but like I said, the sharing of dependencies across Flatpaks, I imagine, is not very common. I imagine it's all just zipped up into a big tarball, whereas in NixOS, it is quite common for different versions of the same application to, for example, use the same version of glibc, something like that. In a Flatpak, it's probably bundled up, different one in each one. And what that means is that in this regime where all your applications are Flatpaks, you might have gotten some security from the immutability of the base image, but you also have the situation where you have a bunch of software that has a bunch of different dependency versions inside of it. How do you audit that for security? What do you do? Maybe there's a good answer to this, but to me, it just seems like, okay, like that we had that WebP thing, the libwebp thing. Which of my Flatpaks has the old version of libwebp that I have to update? I don't know. I wouldn't know how to find out. But in NixOS, it's quite easy. You go and to NixStore. That's the NixStore. I don't know exactly what it's called. WebP. Maybe that's it. Indeed. And probably some of these are have the bug, and I probably have some software around, but it's easy for me to find out. Do I have any software that depends on an old WebP version? Just ls that directory and grep. That's how that works, which I think is pretty cool. So there's another benefit that I didn't write down here is that I can install ancient software on NixOS. I'm sure you could do this with Flatpaks too. It's theoretically the same thing, but I can install ancient software on NixOS and run it on an otherwise up-to-date system. It's quite easy to do that. In any case, presumable reason that NixOS is lumped in with other immutable distributions is because this Nix store that I'm in is immutable. But that's the only thing it has in common with something like Silverblue. When you want to install a new package in Nix, the most common way to do that is to let's see, edit etc Nix, is to do this. Add something like I don't know, minicom, and this. I'll just type it out because this is an alias that people won't understand. But that's how NixOS rebuild switch will now install that piece of software for me, and will add minicom to my to my Nix store, but I'm not adding it as myself. I'm going through this sort of proxy service that Nix has, which is like it manages the store for me. So it talks. It's the only thing that can write to the store. It's otherwise even I think even root can't write to the store. If you cd into Nix store, it won't work. You can't do anything to it. Only the service can manage it. So that's what it shares in common with these other systems. There's this one place in it that is in it, but it's sort of the inverse of these other things. Like in Silverblue, you can only write to like /var and /etc, inside of those two directories. And actually they're treated differently when you upgrade. It's actually kind of mind bending to think about. Like they do a 3-way diff to try to like figure out what the copy is. It's super complicated. It's not so complicated. I mean, Nix is certainly complicated. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't, when you upgrade a package, the immutability is actually just inside the store and not everywhere else. like in Silverblue, the only place you can write to in Silverblue is var. You can write anywhere. Next, I can go to here, and if I su'd, I could make a new directory in root or change something in Etsy, whatever. But so sort of the inverse in a weird way of those other systems. So, and you think to yourself, okay, well, how do you get rid of software then? Well, you actually just garbage collect the things that you don't need anymore are not referred to in either your configuration file like this, or in another thing like a result of a Nix shell or something like that, which is beside the point. But the references to the packages you want are stored, and if somehow they get removed, you run nix collect garbage like that, and that talks to that store service and will delete stuff that that doesn't is not used anymore. And that's probably gonna take a while. So the immutability in NixOS is required by the store design, but it's not really a feature of NixOS that anyone who uses it for any amount of time really thinks about. It just kind of comes along for the rides. When I hear NixOS being called an immutable distro, it's like calling it a car. It's just, yeah. I mean, yeah, the immutability is required, but it's just not. It's not something that's upfront and like useful to think about. It's really not. The real killer features of NixOS are like declarative configuration, like we've seen here, where I can just name something and it, type a command and it does something. I share this between systems. I have 5 systems configured the same way as a result. It's all checked into Git. As I mentioned, the ability to easily run ancient software on otherwise totally up-to-date systems. Awesome. Great. Fantastic. And fearless updates, like, this is a feature of, well, I'm not convinced that it will be a feature of Fedora Silverblue, given the complication that they do have some weirdness about stuff that's changed in the Etsy directory, and they try to do some magic to resolve conflicts and stuff, but it sounds really complicated. So I'm not sure that Silverblue is actually going to follow through on the promise of fearless updates. So maybe I don't know. I've only used it for an hour, so who knows. But in NixOS, it really is fearless updates. I mean, I can switch to that new configuration, but I have probably 20 old configurations laying around that haven't been garbage collected yet that I can switch back to. So if my new kernel doesn't work, or this doesn't include mutations to file system stuff so much. It's just the store that is managed like this. But the other features of NixOS, the declarative configuration, it sort of tries to prevent you from hurting yourself. Like most things are assumed to be to be managed through that configuration file. So as opposed to, let's see, as opposed, like in here, hosts, I have configured this syncoid stuff, which I made another video about, excuse me. And most things in NixOS, you are presumed to want to configure it this way. This is not the configuration file format of the syncoid program. This is Nix, and Nix is wrapping the syncoid thing, and it creates several systemd services, that, you know, timer and an import thing and all kinds of stuff. But you are expected to interact with the system with Nix as this sort of intermediary in between you and this thing. And when you do that, the files that it writes out are typically read-only. So you're not going to, they're read-only, and I suspect in some cases not deletable by, you know, normal users. And when you do that, you know, update this thing, those files get changed on the file system. You're not actually editing them. You're not adding new services to systemd. You're not doing that. You're interacting with Nix in this way. So even if you manage to screw up your home file system, you do still have to make backups of your home file system and even the root. I shouldn't say that. As long as I have this configuration, the stuff that is not in my home directory, I can replay at will. All right. So even if I totally screw things up and I go crazy on my root file system, I manage somehow to get around the back of Nix, all I have to do is just, you know, wipe the drive, you know, after backing up my home directory, more or less, wipe the drive, run the stuff again, and I'll basically be at the same place I was before. So it's not, you know, anyway. So I think the bottom line is that calling NixOS an immutable distribution, I think, really just gives people like the wrong impressions of it, and I think it actually harms, you know, both the things it's being compared to and NixOS, because these two things are not like each other. They, you know, for me anyway, it's using NixOS is just more attractive for the features that I mentioned than any, you know, Silverblue or any other, or really any, not even immutable, but any other Linux distribution. But for you, maybe not. It depends what you want to do. So, you know, there are some certain downsides. There are a lot of them, and it is not a walk in the park to use it. So I was going to do this stuff, you know, here's how you update Silverblue. You run an rpm-ostree update, and then it's got to reboot and everything, but it already did it, so I can't do that. I think I did that already, that Nix flick. Oh, that's how you update Nix. You update the pin. There's pins in a lock file that this Nix flick update will change for you. And it's kind of like a rolling distribution. As soon as you do that, and you run NixOS rebuild switch again, you'll get whatever's upstream, you know, the new versions of stuff. It works pretty well. We already took a look at NixStore, you know, and it's kind of like Flatpak, like things wind up in varlib Flatpak or, you know, local share Flatpak, and the next day wind up in NixStore. That's about it. So anyway, I'm sorry this was a lot of talky and not a lot of demo-y, but I think it's important for people to understand, yeah, it's not a car. It's different. All right. Thanks for watching.